Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
They say people show their true selves at funerals and retirement parties. And let me tell you, Mom's was no exception. The room smelled like champagne and cheap cologne, full of forced laughter, half hugs, and those thinly veiled compliments that taste like poison if you think about them too long. Balloons with happy retirement, Linda, floated near the ceiling like forgotten hopes. Somewhere near the buffet table, someone from Mom's book club spilled a mimosa and blamed it on nerves. Honestly, it could have been me. But I was too busy pretending not to care. The truth is, I didn't want to be there. But how do you skip your mother's retirement party, especially when you've already spent your entire life being labeled the ungrateful one? So I came with a fake smile and a real stomachache. Claire was already there, of course, radiant in a coral dress that somehow managed to scream both money and desperation. Her hair was freshly blown out, her makeup perfect, and her smirk glued in place like it had been stitched there by karma itself. She walked the room like she owned it, which, for the better part of our lives, she sort of did. I stood by the wall nursing a warm drink that tasted like regret. Watching Claire lean into Mom, laugh too loud at dry jokes, introduce herself like some sort of minor celebrity to the guests. "Hi, I'm Claire, the daughter," she kept saying. The daughter, not a daughter. And no one corrected her. Not even Mom. Mom floated through the party in her usual effortless way, charming everyone without really saying anything. You know the type, the kind of woman who could make you feel guilty just by smiling. She was wearing this pale blue suit, tailored to fit a woman 10 years younger, and pearls I recognized from every important occasion of our lives. When she passed me by, she gave me that look, that nod. Like, "Good girl, you showed up." Not a hug. Not even a thank you. Just a nod. And that, folks, is what it's like to grow up in someone else's shadow. When she tapped her glass and everyone hushed, the room shifted. You could feel the anticipation. Maybe it was just me, but it felt like everyone already knew what was coming. She stood at the head of the long dining table, backlit by a wall of photo collages someone, probably Claire, had spent weeks preparing. Most of them were of Mom and Claire. Vacations, graduations, baby pictures. I was in a few, off to the side, usually half blinking or cropped out altogether. Classic. Mom cleared her throat and raised her champagne. "I want to say thank you," she began, her voice clear and too bright. "To all of you, friends, colleagues, family, for coming today to help me celebrate this new chapter of my life. It's been a long journey. A full one." She smiled, and people nodded as if she were reading scripture. But she continued, and this is where it all started to splinter. "There's one person I owe more than anyone else. Someone who's always been there for me. Always looked out for me. Always made sure I had what I needed, even when I didn't know I needed it." And right then, I felt every pair of eyes turn toward Claire. I didn't even have to look. I heard the shuffle of feet, the soft inhale from someone who was clearly touched, the murmurs of people nodding in agreement. Claire straightened up in her seat like a cat preparing to be stroked. "I owe everything," Mom said, pausing like a dramatic actress on a stage she never left, "to my daughter." Claire leaned toward me, barely containing her glee, and whispered, "She means me." Her breath smelled like the expensive wine she always pretends not to finish. And her tone? That smug, syrupy sweetness that made me want to slap the teeth right out of her mouth. I didn't say anything. What could I say? That I'd been the one who drove Mom to her doctor appointments after her knee surgery? That I'd handled the estate paperwork when Dad passed because Claire was too emotional? That I was the one who called every Sunday, even when the conversation was just weather and mild criticism? No. I said nothing. Because I already knew. I saw the man the second he walked in. Tall, pressed suit, a leather briefcase that didn't belong at a party. He stood in the doorway like he owned the air around him, scanning the room with the kind of quiet authority that makes everyone instinctively shut up. A few people glanced at him, confused. He didn't smile. He walked up beside Mom, nodded once, and then turned toward me. "Anna," he said. I nodded. He opened the briefcase and took out a single manila folder, then looked around the room like he was about to deliver bad news. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but Linda requested her will be read today, in the presence of everyone she cared about." You could have heard a pin drop. Claire's face dropped for just a second, not long enough for the guests to notice, but long enough for me to savor. "Mom?" She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. The man opened the folder and continued. Per her instructions, I'll begin with a letter addressed to her daughters. The word hung in the air, daughters, plural. And just like that, the party changed. The silence that followed the lawyer's announcement wasn't peaceful or reverent. It was tense, crackling, the kind of silence that settles when too many people are trying too hard not to say what they're really thinking. Claire's smile didn't falter at first, but I knew her too well not to notice the twitch in her right eyebrow, the subtle shift in her posture, like a performer realizing the spotlight might be moving off her and onto someone else. She smoothed her dress with that annoying grace of hers, but she didn't say a word. Not yet. Everyone else stayed frozen, waiting for someone, anyone, to break the tension, but the lawyer didn't wait. He flipped open the folder like he was just reading off the day's weather report and said, "There's a letter. It's addressed to Anna." And just like that, I felt every eye in that damned room swing back toward me, even though not one of them had really looked at me before that moment. My stomach didn't twist. My heart didn't race. I just stood there, perfectly still, like I'd been trained for this my whole life, which, in a way, I guess I had. The funny thing is, when I think about Claire and me, I don't remember full days or events so much as I remember flashes, like Polaroids in my head, curling at the edges, yellowed from time and bitterness. Claire getting the bigger slice of birthday cake and telling me it was because she was older. Claire getting the new dress for Easter while I wore the one she'd outgrown the year before. Claire standing on stage at our school talent show, lip-syncing some pop song while Mom clapped like she was watching the second coming of Madonna, and I stood backstage holding the tape deck because someone had to press play. People always talk about golden children like they're born that way, like it's destiny. But I don't think that's true. I think some parents just pick their favorites early and spend the rest of their lives pretending it's about merit. Claire wasn't better than me. She was just louder, shinier, and better at telling people what they wanted to hear. And Mom? Mom liked things that looked good on the outside. She liked praise. She liked compliments. She liked being the kind of woman whose daughter became a lawyer and married a man with money and a golf membership. And Claire gave her all of that. I gave her rides to doctor appointments and picked up her prescriptions. I stayed on the phone with the insurance company when her knee replacement claim was denied. I spent weekends fixing the gutters on her roof while Claire posted pictures from Napa Valley with captions like #selfcare. But none of that was glamorous, so none of it counted. We hadn't spoken properly in nearly 32 years, since I was 10 and Claire was 11. So we were, 26 back then? I don't even remember what we fought about. Probably something small. They usually start that way, but it grew over time, layered with resentment and the kind of sharp-edged silence only sisters can weaponize. At some point, it just became easier not to talk. Safer. Dad died when I was 23. That I remember with brutal clarity. He left behind a garage full of dusty tools, a broken riding mower, and a single, leather-bound notebook. On the cover, he had written in that neat, blocky handwriting I used to copy as a kid, "To Anna, for when you need to know who you are." I didn't even know he'd been writing in it until the lawyer handed it to me at the funeral. Claire didn't get anything, not even a mention. She cried about that, of course. Loudly. At the graveside. With mascara running down her cheeks and a fresh manicure sparkling in the sun. Inside the notebook, Dad had written little pieces of advice, things he'd never said out loud. Stuff like, don't trust people who smile when they say, "Bless your heart," and you're allowed to leave when the room stops feeling like yours. Some of it was funny. Some of it cut deep. But there was one page torn out near the end. I didn't notice at first. Just a jagged edge, like it had been ripped in a hurry. For years, I wondered what had been on that page. I told myself it probably wasn't important. But I never quite believed it. Claire never asked about the notebook. She always said it was sentimental junk. Said Dad was a good man, but a simple one. That he never understood ambition. That he held her back. That's when I knew, really knew, she'd never seen him the way I had. He wasn't loud. He didn't take up space. But when he spoke, it mattered. He saw me when no one else did. He knew I wasn't just the shadow to Claire's spotlight. I think he saw the anger in me before I even knew it was there. And I think he knew what I'd need later. The lawyer cleared his throat, shaking me out of the memory. He held out the letter like it was something delicate, something sacred. I took it without a word. The paper was cream-colored, folded neatly, with my name written in ink that looked like it had been written with care and maybe a little guilt. Claire made a noise, something between a scoff and a laugh, and said, "Really? She wrote you a letter? How quaint." I turned to her then, met her eyes, and smiled. Not the polite smile I'd worn all evening. A real smile. The kind that says I know something you don't. The lawyer looked back at the folder, adjusted his glasses, and said, "There's more. After the letter, we'll go over the details of the estate. Assets, property, all that." Claire sat up straighter, just like she used to when she was called on in class. She was ready. She was sure she was the heir. Of course she was. She had no idea what was coming. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, like it had soaked up years of silence and now refused to be light again. I didn't open it right away, even though every eye in the room screamed for me to do so. My fingers hovered over the flap for a second longer than necessary, savoring the discomfort, not mine, but theirs. Claire was practically vibrating in her seat, trying to look casual but failing miserably. Her smile had wilted into something thinner, tighter, as if she already knew that whatever came next might not have her name on it. When I finally opened it, the seal broke with a soft crack, like something old giving way. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, folded once down the middle. The handwriting was Mom's, unmistakably hers, a little slanted to the right, careful, elegant, the same handwriting that used to appear on our birthday cards and passive-aggressive notes left on the fridge. I unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear the creases, and started reading. I didn't read it out loud, though people clearly expected me to. I read it silently, line by line, and let the words settle in like dust on old furniture. "Anna," it began, which already told me more than I thought it would. She had used my name, not sweetheart, or honey, or one of those hollow terms of endearment she handed out like grocery store coupons. Just Anna. And for once, that felt real. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me like this. I know I wasn't the mother you needed. I gave more than I should have to things that didn't matter and gave less to the things that did. I saw you standing in the background more times than I care to admit, and I let it happen. Maybe I even encouraged it. I don't know why I did that. Maybe I thought Claire needed more. Maybe I thought you were stronger. Maybe I was just lazy. I don't know anymore. I just know I was wrong." There it was. Not an apology exactly, but something in the neighborhood of one. Close enough to sting. I kept reading, my heart strangely calm. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt like I'd stepped outside my body and was watching someone else read a confession meant for them, but it still hit like it had my name carved into every word. "Do you remember that night when you were 16? The night the vase broke? I told your father it was you. I knew it wasn't. I knew it had been Claire, but I let you take the blame. You were grounded for a month. You missed your school trip, the one you'd saved up for. Your dad was so disappointed. He barely looked at you for weeks. And still, you didn't say a word. You never defended yourself. You just took it. I think that was the moment I realized how badly I'd failed you. But by then, I didn't know how to undo it. It all came back in a rush, the sharp sound of glass shattering, the look on Dad's face, the silence that followed. I had buried that night so deep I forgot it was real. I remember the aching disappointment in my chest, the way I held it in, the way I kept hoping someone would tell the truth. But no one ever did. Until now. Years too late. Claire, sensing the shift in energy, laughed, not a full laugh, but that high, breathy chuckle she uses when she's uncomfortable. "Oh, come on," she said, rolling her eyes. You're not seriously going to pretend that letter means something. She was probably senile when she wrote it. Or medicated. Or both. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. Because here's the thing, when someone's been handed everything their whole life, the idea that something might be meant for someone else becomes incomprehensible. Claire had never been the one left behind. Never been the one overlooked or underestimated. She had no idea how powerful it is to finally be seen. The lawyer didn't react to Claire's comment. He'd probably seen worse. Entitlement makes people stupid. He adjusted his glasses, looked down at the papers in front of him, and cleared his throat with the kind of finality that demanded attention. Now, he said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife sliding through thick icing, about the house and the business, and just like that, every smile in the room vanished. For a long, drawn-out moment, the entire room seemed to exhale in unison, the kind of breath that sounds less like relief and more like everyone trying not to be the first one to speak. The lawyer's words had dropped like bricks into water, and the ripples hadn't yet reached the edges of everyone's consciousness. Claire, to her credit, didn't explode right away. No, first she blinked. Then she blinked again. Her lips parted like she was about to deliver a gracious statement, something clean and self-assured, but nothing came out. Her confidence faltered for just a flicker, and that flicker was all I needed to know it was real. This wasn't a bluff, a tease, or some elaborate game Mom had rigged to make me feel temporarily relevant. This was happening. The will was real. And it was about to get loud. The lawyer, Mr. Preston, though I only remembered his name because it was engraved into his briefcase like a man who trusted objects more than people, continued without fanfare. Per the instructions laid out by Linda Jean Ashcroft, signed and notarized on March 15, 2022, the primary property located at 43 Oakview Lane is to be transferred in full to Anna Marie Ashcroft, effective immediately. A few people gasped. Not loudly, but just enough for it to feel theatrical. Claire's jaw stiffened. She didn't look at me. Not yet. Mr. Preston adjusted his glasses and kept reading. In addition, the business known as Ashcroft Interiors, including all assets, client contracts, and the remaining business trust, is also to be transferred to Anna Marie Ashcroft. Another pause, another collective shift in the room's temperature. The air had gone stale, and someone in the back coughed like it might clear more than just their throat. Claire finally moved. She leaned forward, her voice sharp and rising. "Excuse me," she said, her voice laced with all the venom of a woman who has never been told no, without a follow-up apology. "That must be a mistake. That business was supposed to go to me. Everyone knew that. I ran the showroom when Mom was in Cabo for 6 weeks. I did the charity events. I hosted the clients. I kept the name alive." Mr. Preston didn't flinch. "There's no mistake. Your mother left explicit instructions." He held up the documents as if showing the gospel. "And the clause was triggered by a specific verbal condition, which was fulfilled earlier this evening." Claire turned toward Mom then, eyes wide with disbelief, mouth twitching with 1,000 unsaid profanities. "You didn't mean her when you said that toast, did you?" she asked, her voice climbing, unraveling with each syllable. "You were just being polite. You were being vague. You always do that. You didn't mean to start this." Mom, to her credit or perhaps her shame, said absolutely nothing. She stared ahead, blinking slow, shallow blinks, her wine glass trembling ever so slightly in her hand. I watched the color drain from her face like wine spilled onto a white blouse, quick, messy, irreversible. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt something else entirely. I felt calm. See, I had known. Not everything, not the exact wording or the timing or the specific execution, but I had known something was coming. I'd known it ever since I found the legal draft buried in the back of Mom's filing cabinet 6 months ago, folded between old medical receipts and useless warranties. It had taken me less than a minute to understand what it was, but much longer to decide what to do with it. She'd written it, the will, the clause, and then done nothing about it. Classic. half a step forward and then a quick backpedal. I wasn't surprised. She always chose safety over confrontation, reputation over honesty. But the clause, oh, the clause. Should there be a public and exclusive acknowledgement of one daughter over another in any setting involving family or professional peers, the will is to be considered active and binding. It was buried in the addendum, written in vague enough language to confuse most people, but not me. I had sent a copy to Mr. Preston with a single note. She won't do it on purpose. But if she does it in front of people, it needs to count. He hadn't responded with anything more than a single understood. That was all I needed. Claire was still fuming. Her voice had gone shrill, the kind of tone people mistake for authority, but really comes from panic. You knew, didn't you? She hissed at me. You planned this. You manipulated her. You waited for her to say something in public. I didn't blink. She said what she meant. I answered quietly, evenly. Maybe not out loud to herself, but loud enough for the room to hear. The room remained uncomfortably still. No one wanted to get in the middle of this, not even Mom's oldest friends, not even the ones who always said, "You girls are just so different," in that painfully neutral tone that means, one of you is exhausting and we know which one. I stood, because I'd had enough of sitting in rooms where I wasn't supposed to speak. I walked toward the exit, slow, deliberate steps, the kind of walk that says I don't need the last word. I already won. But of course, Claire followed. Outside, the air was cold and sharp against my skin, like the night itself was listening. Claire's heels clicked against the patio stone behind me, angry, uneven strides. This isn't over, she snapped. She loved me more. No matter what she signed, she loved me more. I turned slowly, met her eyes without flinching, and said the only thing that had been on my tongue since I first found that torn page in Dad's notebook. That's why I left the last page blank. There's something sharp about silence when it follows a scream, like a knife that's already done its cutting but still hovers in the air, reminding everyone just how close it came. After Claire shouted those final words, there was nothing left for her to say, and nothing left for me to hear. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. That wasn't her style. She turned on her heel and marched back inside the house, probably thinking she could salvage what was left of her dignity. But dignity doesn't survive in people who believe it's something inherited rather than earned, and Claire had been coasting on fumes for a long, long time. I stayed outside a moment longer, letting the cold settle into my chest, letting the stillness undo whatever was still tangled inside me. That's when I thought of the notebook again, the one my father left me, the one with the torn page near the back that had haunted me for more years than I care to count. At first, I assumed it had been an accident, that maybe the paper had just fallen out or been misplaced in some forgotten drawer, but deep down I knew better. Dad didn't make mistakes like that. If something was missing, it was on purpose. The truth is, I had found that missing page over a decade ago, tucked inside an envelope at the bottom of an old toolbox he'd kept hidden under the workbench in the garage. I don't even know why I was looking there. Maybe I needed to feel close to him. Maybe I just needed something to fix. But there it was, sealed and waiting, addressed to me in that same steady handwriting I remembered from every science project poster and Christmas label. I didn't open it right away. Something about it felt sacred, final. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me, or maybe pain did, and I unfolded the page with the kind of reverence usually reserved for funeral cards. There weren't paragraphs, no instructions or long-winded confessions, just a single sentence in the middle of the page, like he wanted the words to breathe on their own. "Revenge, my girl, is best served in silence." That was it. No signature, no date, no explanation. Just those 8 words, like a ghost whispering from the corner of a room. And I knew without needing anyone else to say it, that he wasn't talking about revenge born from pettiness or bitterness. He meant the kind that's earned. The kind that creeps up slowly. The kind that doesn't need an audience to feel like justice. So I waited. I didn't scream. I didn't lash out. I didn't throw tantrums or make scenes or confront Mom in front of holiday dinners like I used to imagine. I waited and I watched, and I let everyone believe what they wanted to believe, that Claire was the chosen one, that I was the spare part, the shadow, the seat filler at every family gathering. And when the moment finally came, I didn't flinch. The next day, the paperwork was signed. Mr. Preston filed the documents like a man who'd done this 1,000 times and seen 1,000 faces twist in disbelief. Claire's was no different. But what no one expected, not even Preston, was what I did next. The house, the one on Oakview Lane with the wraparound porch and creaky stairs and the faint smell of cinnamon that had never quite gone away, I donated it. All of it. Every shingle, every cracked window, every crooked floorboard. I handed it over to a women's shelter that had been trying to open a second location for years. They cried when I signed the deed. I didn't. The business I sold for just under 7 figures. Not bad for something Claire used to call barely worth the paperwork. I used part of the money to set up a scholarship fund for young women pursuing interior design under Claire's name. That part was important to me. Because now, every year, when the board announces new recipients, when the donations come in, when reporters write puff pieces about her generosity, she'll have to sit there and nod and smile like it was her idea. And every time someone thanks her, she'll have to say, "You're welcome," through gritted teeth, knowing full well it wasn't her kindness that made it happen. Mom never reached out. Not at first. I didn't expect her to. She wasn't the kind of woman who apologized twice. But a few weeks after the will was executed, I got a voicemail. I didn't answer. I was in the middle of painting my kitchen, but the message came through clear. Her voice was shaky, softer than I remembered. "Anna," she said, and there was a long pause after that. I never told you the truth about." Then it cut off. No follow-up. No second message. Just silence. I listened to that voicemail more times than I care to admit, trying to find meaning in the static, wondering what word might have come next. Was it about Dad? Was it about Claire? Was it about me? I'll never know. And maybe that's the point. People always want clean endings. They want heroes and villains and climactic showdowns where everything makes sense in the end. But real life doesn't work like that. Real life is messy and unfair and full of people who get away with too much for too long. All I did was tip the scales back to where they should have been in the first place. I didn't take everything. I just made sure she'd never be able to pretend again.